Okay, I'm not going to talk about the OTTs. We believe the level of competition from an infrastructure perspective, from a service perspective, prices going down, coverage increasing, quality networks in the country, innovation in the country, we believe it's basically working. However, it can actually improve. And the biggest issue we have to deal with is that of spectrum, which is the next point. I think I have to commend Minister Kwele that finally we are waking up. Next year, I think before the elections, we should have spectrum if we listen to what's actually being said. And for me, I basically have to trust them because I need the spectrum. So I have to prepare myself. But we cannot afford to delay on the 5G. The Americans have already launched 5G. Verizon launched 5G. AT&T launched 5G. BT in the UK, in London, launched 5G. We cannot waste another 7 years trying to figure out the spectrum on the 5G. We need to license the 5G spectrum straight away. Because again, to Shamil's point, one of the main reasons why the rich households, they tend to have cheaper data than the poor households. The rich households have got access to fiber. The cheapest way to consume fiber, or to consume data, is to have fiber. It is fast, it is unlimited. I think you guys, you have these kids every time say, hey, what's the Wi-Fi, what's the Wi-Fi? I said, so go to my granny's house in Orange Farm and ask for Wi-Fi. So 5G will help us basically like leapfrog that situation. And another important point, the world is not going to wait for us. What happens if you keep on deterring on these things? We just get left behind. This is the country that when it comes to 3G, when it comes to innovation, affordability, I think a previous speaker again spoke about who invented prepaid for the world. It was MTN and Vodacom. We can invent a lot again when you get this 5G. Now there's 6 of us. Imagine in '96, it was only 2 of us. So give us 5G, so we can actually deliver the 4th industrial revolution, so that this time around we can actually play a serious part, unlike the previous ones who ended up as colonies. Then the other point is around the state of the competition. On my conclusion, we believe, and we've got evidence, that the rates are actually falling. Double-digit effective rates, 27%, MTN the first half of this year. The broadband coverage is scaling up. 4G by the end of the year is going to be 90%. We're actually aiming for universal access. I am pushing these guys that in 2 years' time, and I know the CASA guys are not here. Yeah, when the CASA have given us a spectrum, in a year's time, we should be able to have everyone being able to have access to 4G in this country. And with all due respect, whether you ask Telkom or you ask Celsi, who are actually on our networks today, we don't discriminate. We give you 3G roaming, 4G roaming, and it's up to you to come and choose. We actually like the 4G roaming because it is cheaper to deliver than the 3G roaming. Because even with the new spectrum is for 4G, it still doesn't help you a lot with the 3G. And then also the proliferation of consumer choices and the personalization thereof. Dr. Mngube, just to illustrate this point, today on the MTN network, in the middle of the night until the morning, you can buy a gig of data for 10 rands. If you've got the yellow SIM card and you're on prepaid where the poor are, please dial *141 *2#. It's there. On the same network, you can buy a gig for the day, for the day for $50. Or you can buy it for $70 for the week. Or you can buy it for $149 for a month. The choice is there. I know there's a lot of debate around why the 149 price is basically not changing. The thing that we play with in this industry is what we call elasticity. Where do you find the biggest response? And we do a lot of simulations on this. The most expensive salaries now we're starting to pay is not on these guys, the engineers. It's to the data scientists and the actuaries that we're actually hiring. So the whole thing of customer value management, the whole thing of artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data, we are using that to basically create pricing, to create specific personalized offers. You can't regulate you can't regulate it, because this thing, it learns even now I'm sitting here, it's learning and it's preparing an offer for me. So that's why I'm saying it is not a simplistic situation. And then the last point is around, if I was allowed to ask, I always ask them anyway, the regulators, whether they listen to me or not, it's another story. The first one, the agency to license the spectrum is now. Can you please get 4G and 5G next year? 4G and 5G next year. One, we have a position on one, and it is official and it is open. Sometimes in negotiations, you have to go for compromise. We agree to the hybrid model, that the one can actually coexist with the other operators. What we are worried about is that we need to preserve the incentive to compete at an infrastructure level. For instance, if the story is that I know it's still at the draft stage, because every time I raise this with the policymakers and with the CASA, they say it is at a draft stage. Give us the input, not just be shouting at us. If we are saying the one to be viable requires 10 million customers, then why is one getting the bulk of the 4G spectrum when MTN has got 30 million customers? If we're saying the fiscus, thank you. If we're saying the fiscus is under pressure, I am not speculating. Actually, I am speculating. The fiscus is under pressure, and it has to raise money from the spectrum. Why would you give most of the spectrum to the guy who's going to pay the least, as opposed to the guys where you're going to monetize best? Let me be clear. We support the hybrid model. We support the one. We just request from the regulators, they need to preserve the incentive to compete at an infrastructure level, because experience tells us that infrastructure competition is critical to deliver even effective service competition. Whether you go to Verizon or you go to AT&T, I'll give you. I think Snakes made a point around consolidation. Sprint and T-Mobile in the US are actually going through the regulators, basically filing for consolidation. America is over 300 million people. Practically, they've got 4 networks, and they're trying to get into 3. This is a cash, capex hungry industry. You need to have people who can basically plow the towers on the ground so that we can deliver the infrastructure. And we need to be given the spectrum so we can have the oxygen to have the capacity so we can lower the prices. The other part is that it is very difficult to get permission to build sites in this country, especially in the rich areas. The rich people want the best coverage, but they don't want us to build the sites. When I push back on that one, I don't have a lot of rich friends, but I have this guy. They say, innovate. We do not have an innovation yet to deliver a network without sites. So please help us on the rapid deployment. I know DG Nkuna is really pushing very hard on that one. But again, we need that legislation. Of course, it has to be done tastefully and also with proper consultations. And we have to look after the aesthetics of those areas. We have to have environmental considerations and so on and so forth. It is possible. But the solution is not just to block. And then now I can't basically get network in these areas. Actually, these areas are actually very, very financially viable. The last one is possibly one of the most important one for us. There is this discussion that, again, I'm talking about the draft paper or the policy directive, that if you own a network, more than 25% of the network, you need to open that one up to everyone at cost. It doesn't even